Welcome, students. Welcome to another edition of Who Am I and What's My Story? And I'm here with David Butters in a pretty out-of-sight place. Okay, so David, tell us where we're at.
Okay, we're at a hole in the wall, and it's a place where the pioneers blasted their way down, cut their way down through this the rock here to get across the Colorado River. And it's pretty insane.
It's like a cliff.
It's a cliff,
essentially.
Basically, they had 10 guys holding on the back of the wagon with ropes to lower it down, lowering guys down in barrels to blow the rock up with dynamite.
And it is literally just a crack in this rock, and they found the starting of it. And what we're looking at now is Lake Powell, but back then it was the Colorado River, and they had to get across it to form colonies in Arizona. Okay, so this is a cool place, David, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Myself, I grew up in Hinckley, California. The environment very similar to what we just drove through in the middle of the desert. I studied music to start with.
What's your instrument?
Clarinet.
Oh, cool.
And I would major in that. I had a scholarship, but I hated it after a while. So I ended up getting an engineering degree. And
why engineering?
I liked it. I tried a lot of different things. I wasn't very good at math during high school, which is kind of interesting because you'd think you have to be really good at math, but it just started clicking when I got to college, and it became easy, a lot easier than it was before. And engineering was fun. We got to build things, make things work, learn how computers work. One semester I built the memory board for a computer, and the next semester I built the CPU out of just discrete logic components. And so it was interesting. I liked doing it.
And then who did you work for in your career?
I started working for General Dynamics initially, and I wrote what they call hardware control drivers for the B-1 bomber. It was the firmware that is inside the actual plane itself that makes it fly. It's a fly-by-wire type system. So, and then I became a program manager with them and managed large-scale programs, $150 million programs of various types. You know, everything from the B-2 bomber, I worked on part of that, all the way to classified programs that were involved things that, you know,
that you can't talk about.
Can't talk about.
Or you'd have to kill it.
Or I'd have to kill y'all. Yeah. So, and then I during the downturn in the defense industry in the late 80s, well, I guess it was the early 90s, I went to work for Hewlett-Packard. I worked for them for about 6 years. And then I did a kind of a score of little one-year contracts with a couple different companies. And then I got a job with a startup in San Francisco, lived in Half Moon Bay, and worked for them for a couple years before they went bankrupt. So startups are not always a good thing to get involved in. And then I went to work for a company called Bearing Point. At the time it was called KPMG. And it was one of the big five consulting firms before all that stuff fell apart. And I did a lot of business consulting. I wrote a lot of business plans for things like satellite internet access for Hughes Network Systems. I ran the service launch program for Orange Telecom in Thailand. I was supposed to go to Iraq. I decided not to.
And that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Because you're still here with us.
I'm still, yeah. The guy that went instead of me, he came back and he said he got shot at every week, just about almost every day. He said it was terrible. He had his own Delta Force, couldn't do anything. Had to have an itinerary to go to the bathroom, pretty much. So anyway.
And that's what you've done.
And that's it.
Yeah. So electrical engineering.
Yeah.
Can you tell me some of the other types of engineering that there is?
There's mechanical engineering. You got computer engineering. You've got chemical engineering. There's physics. There's chemistry. And there's a difference between, like, when we say a physicist and like an engineer, and a scientist and an engineer. One works a lot with theoretical stuff. Like a chemist would be a theoretical guy, whereas a chemical engineer is a guy that actually takes a theory and then makes it work.
How interesting.
In the practical world. So if you watch The Big Bang Theory, they're theoretical physicists. So those guys, they just think, and for a living, that's all they do. They don't have to make anything work. Somebody else makes it work.
But engineers have to make it work.
Engineers have to make it work. It's kind of like if you imagine a basketball court, and you go halfway every time, and so you got half court, then you go to quarter, then you keep cutting it up and going halfway. After a certain period of time, you're close enough to the end that you're at the end. And that's what an engineer does. It makes that assumption that, okay, we're at the end. Whereas a theoretical scientist, physicist, whatever, they don't ever make that assumption. They assume you never get to the end.
How interesting.
And it's a completely different philosophy. And that's why things work, because of engineers. Don't let anybody tell you anything different.
Well, thanks for telling us your story in such a cool place. Look at that.
I know.
That's Lake Powell right down there.
Is.
And that's what those pioneers did.
I cannot believe they cut that hole in the rock.
Yeah, and
Those
around
wagons down through that.
out of sight. Thanks a lot,
You're
David.
welcome.